Hi, if you've been tuning into my podcast, you probably know that my husband and I have been trying to make a baby, and we're going to require in vitro fertilization. So, if you'd like to help us in that endeavor, I welcome you to please buy something from my eBay store or support me on Patreon. The links are below. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another podcast of Jenna Loves Allah SWT. So glad you could be with me. And I welcome you to please make this a little more interactive, either with your comments down below or by joining me on Patreon, where we can really get some dialogue going. And today I'm going to talk about modern conveniences in green tech and how these might not be as good for us as the powers that be would like us to believe. Before I start, a big bismillah, because I would really like to have Allah's blessing on everything I do. And that's just my way of getting things on the go. And hopefully that everything I have to say somehow helps you with your day. And if it could be a blessing to you too, then that's just all the better. Okay, first of all, modern conveniences. When I first moved, needed to find a place, I was really hard pressed to find a place that didn't have already a built-in dishwasher and everything else that goes with carburetors. I don't use these things. I find them really useless. I mean, as far as the carburetor goes, well, a composter is more green. So having a carburetor to me is very, very wasteful. And when they break down, they really break down. As for a dishwasher, I find you have to wash your dishes twice in order to do it right. Do dishwashers exist that you can get away with that? Well, I've heard they do, some of the really expensive modern ones, but I'm not about to invest that in a dishwasher when I'm perfectly capable of washing the dishes myself. And as for the dishwasher using less water, well, I'm not one to fill up my sink with water, but to do the dishes. I will use either a pot or a bowl, a mixing bowl, or whatever I've actually dirtied as my main container for doing the dishes in. Start with really hot water, do the glasses first, and use the opposite sink just for a quick rinse. And they're done. And I use a lot less water, get the dishes done a lot more quickly. And I use really, really hot water, what most people would have to actually wear rubber gloves to put their hands in. But for some reason, because I've been doing this since I was a little kid, my hands don't react to it. So this is just one of the modern conveniences that seem to be unavoidable these days. That they seem to be everywhere. And it's not really that useful, and it's not really helping that much. And it can really run up your electrical bills. You become dependent on these things. I don't know how many people just stuff their dishwasher and then there's like fights or somebody didn't turn the dishwasher on or whatever. Just if you do all your dishes by hand all the time, you know when there's dishes that need to be done because they're right there in the sink and you can't miss them. So it's a really good way of saying they're not out of sight or out of mind. They're like, there they are, do them, get them done. And it also, just makes life better because you know what needs to be done and it's not put off to tomorrow. It doesn't increase your procrastination. It doesn't, you don't end up doing an entire load in the machine when there's just a few things. So, do it by hand. It's better. And it also is a great way to teach children responsibility. I learned how to do the dishes when I was very young. It was one of the chores that my parents gave to us children was to get the dishes done, how to clean them properly, how to dry them off completely before putting them away, stuff like that. So these things aren't necessarily the best. That's just one convenience that I can think of right now. I'd like to talk more about green tech because green tech and the push for green energy, green this, green that, everything with the politics of today is very much being something that is pushed on us as to be socially responsible. We have to go for this. But I find it ridiculous, really, because at the same time, the more authoritative governing bodies and things that we have, like the HOAs, for instance, homeowners associations, they prevent us from doing things which are the ultimate in green tech, like putting a clothesline out on your balcony or porch or whatever. Your neighbors are like, oh no, you can't have that. Whereas I remember when I was a little kid, clotheslines ran between properties like all over the place. Nobody was thinking it was an eyesore. People were all hanging their stuff out. It was a part of the community. It was saying people live here. And when mothers or children or whatever were out there hanging up the clothes or taking down the clothes on the line, they were talking to one another. It was building a community. It was causing you to interface with one another. Now they just sell you washers and dryers that are stackable, front loading, whatever, all the new conveniences, and say that, oh, it's green tech because it uses less energy, or it doesn't run as hot, or whatever, when you can just put it outside, or you used to be able to just put it outside, and that was the greenest tech going, because you had the sunshine and the wind and all that to take care of drying your clothes. It didn't always work the best in the winter, particularly for a pair of jeans. But then that was part of the fun of growing up too. You take your jeans off the line and they stand up on their own. We had a lot of fun as kids playing with stuff like that. I remember my dad's wool socks one time. They were like these stiff wool socks, and we're like trying to build a person out of these clothes. Of course, it didn't stay like that for very long, but it was fun. And there's a lot of things, like our cars. I look at all these new electric cars and stuff. Not only do we have problems in some of the hotter climates where they're blowing up because the heat just accumulates on the batteries, but you also have the situation where all the older cars, which used to be maintained, are just taken off the road, thrown away, put into wastelands. We have cars that haven't even been sold, owned by the companies that produce them, sitting in parking lots all over the place. There's been this surproduction, and they're not even going back to those ones to sell them because it's always more and more and more new tech that's got to be put out. This is not a viable way to do things. The truth of the matter is, you take a car from like the 90s that doesn't have all the electronic components in it, and it was pretty much having the same sort of environmental impact as the ones today, except for the fact that, of course, it runs on fuel if you change that fuel to electric. But for all the needs for the production for an electric car and the waste that gets created by the batteries, we're looking at an even Steven. And when you factor in the fact that these older cars you can actually maintain through older parts, we're now factoring in a recycling thing as opposed to a brand new production thing. And every time you have brand new production, there's a lot more energetic cost, there's a lot more waste, there's a lot more plastics and fuels and stuff going into the production of these things. And nobody's actually counting the true numbers as to what is the actual production level costs for making one of these, and what is the actual gain that you get from going from fossil fuels to non-fossil fuels. What is the actual waste that you're getting from all the batteries compared to the output that you might get from driving a car that is run off of gasoline. So given all those things and the fact that they're not actually comparing apples to apples, we're comparing apples to grapes or something like that, it might both be food, but it's not going to be a good, valid comparison. We see this over and over and over again. When somebody wants to push an agenda, they don't give you true comparables when they're lining them up. And this is media manipulation, where if you don't know what to look for and you don't know what's missing, you're never going to ask the question. You're just going to say, well, this is better because they said it's better. And it's not usually true. There's usually an agenda to sell more behind it. And when you look at the cost of a car today, especially a brand new one, compared to just buying an older used car and maintaining it, we're talking go into debt to have that car, or just use the old one, keep it fixed, learn how to fix it. That in itself is a good thing. You can get your hands into the old ones. They didn't cover it all up under layers of plastic to keep you out of it. And the parts were really easy to get to. I know several mechanics that tell me time and time again, no, the older ones were a lot better to work on. So there are a lot of problems that come with constantly going after this new tech, this green tech. And like I said before, it's not really green. And if we really wanted to have green technologies, we'd be riding horses and camels and whatever other animal that's a beast of burden that can be ridden like that, because that's getting right back to the very basics where it's non-polluting, it's natural, it's good for humanity as a whole, but they don't want us to do that. They, like I said, like the hoa where you can't have your clothes hung out for the horses, they can only be in certain areas because of all the cars and traffic and congestion. And understandably, I mean, it's not good for the animal to be in the middle of a city court. But at the same time, there's very few places where you can still just ride your animal from farm to farm without having a lot of problems from using them near the road or whatever. You have to be in an extremely rural area, because once they get any kind of city planning in there, even if it's really not a high traffic area, you've got somebody saying, can't do this, and it's really not hurting the animals as much as it's just them putting down the rules. As far as I know, they still have horses that the police use in New York City. So, it is a possibility to do, but it's not for the average person to be able to do that. So, that's just basically what I wanted to get at. Just get you thinking, think about some of the modern conveniences that you might have, and try to think about whether or not there is a better way to do things, or used to be a better way to do things. I mean, everything from a refrigerator, which people think, oh my goodness, how could you live without a refrigerator, to your oven. There are other ways of doing things. The refrigerator, just to let you know something that most of you probably don't, right up until the 70s in England, they were still using lotters, which basically was like a cold storage room instead of having a refrigerator right inside the household. And that was good enough. You had to shop a little more frequently. You had to plan your meat consumption. You weren't buying near the amount of frozen foods. But that was also a time when we could go out and literally plant a garden in our backyard. Again, no homeowners association. Nobody, putting their 2 cents in saying what you can and cannot do. And again, green tech, the true green tech. You go out and you do it for yourself. And maybe just that's what I want to get at. Modern conveniences are actually there to make us lazy, not to help us get through things. It's to make us dependent upon somebody else. We have to go get more work, double career families, stuff like that, because we need to pay for all these things. And then in order to maintain them, you've got to keep that up. If you had somebody that was able to stay at home and just take care of the household, you could do all these other wonderful little things like keep a garden, hang up the clothes on the line, everything else to that effect, because you wouldn't be drawn in 2 directions. So it's a catch-22. As we give up the old ways of doing things, we become more and more dependent upon the new ways that have been constructed for us. And those new ways entrap us and keep us in this loop where we never really get ahead, and we're always just struggling from day to day to move on. And I look at the fact that I grew up relatively poor as a wonderful blessing from Allah, because I learned how to do things with things. I learned that when the furnace stops working in the middle of winter, you wear your winter clothes to bed, and it's most important to have wool socks and a toque. That's ski cap on your head when you're sleeping. And I also learned that self-reliance is one of the greatest gifts. When I look at people who lose their jobs and things like that, they're completely lost. Some of them go into severe depressions. They don't know what to do with themselves. As a counselor, I get phone calls for things like this. So it's all about knowing how to be dependent and knowing what to do with yourself. And sometimes people just haven't got a clue as to where to start taking control of their lives. So I think part of what I want to do is, if there's any part of your life where you're just like, how could I do better with this, or struggling or whatnot, yeah, feel free to reach out. Get maybe some dialogue between the people as to what they're doing to cut corners or save, or what works to be more efficient in their household, to be more organized, because that's, that builds a community. So hopefully this is well received, and I hope to hear back from all of you soon.